to be here. Just I don't know, just listening to Leo and his testimony, and my story is very similar, you know. But the bank didn't approve me to buy the apartment, the fourplex. I actually tried to do that. I had to go a different route, you know. When I started, I had a 401k. I had $6,500 in my 401k. I cashed it, paid the penalty, and that's how we started the businesses that we're in. So I think that's a story, you know, when we look at the multiplication principles of God and how they work in our lives, you know, and you know that the promises of God are available to all of us, right? So it's not an exclusive club for sure. Okay, so today I want to talk to you, and I've just felt to give a little bit of background and testimony about how this understanding came to me, you know. So we're in manufacturing, had a big warehouse. Are y'all familiar with lighting? You have the metal halide lights, like the 1,000-watt ones. And you throw a big breaker, it's like blam, and it's like blah, and about 5 minutes later, you get some decent light, you know. So money was tight, and I needed light at different times at different places. So I thought, man, if I could just turn on one light instead of all 20, that's 20,000 watts every time you try to turn a light on. So my electrician said, yeah, you just put about 300 switches on the wall. You can turn whatever you want, Mark, you know. And I said, no, it's got to be a better way. So I had an idea, you know, never despise small beginnings. So, you know the little laser pen that the teachers used? I said, man, I'll get that pen, I'll reflect it off mirrors onto a sensor, work a relay, and turn one light on, and all of them can be on the same circuit. I can turn one light on, and then I can turn it off, right? And amazingly, it worked perfect, you know. So I would invite people to the warehouse. I'd walk around, get my little pen, turn the light on, you know. They're like, whoa, wait a minute, what did you just do, you know? Then I'd turn it off, you know, and it was great. Well, from that, we said, well, metal halide's not that great. We went to high output fluorescence, and we designed an aluminum extrusion light fixture. My brother designed it for me from an aircraft background, so this thing looked like an airplane, you know. And then we got into wireless controls, used Zigbee protocols, and then we ran across an idea of how to control multiple devices on a wireless network. So this is like 2007. So I was in that process of trying to decide, what do I do with this? You know, do we actually manufacture this? So we were making these things like printing the circuit boards, buying the components, magnifying glasses, you know, just welding things and writing the programs and getting it all, but it was working, you know. But I had a decision. Do we introduce this? Do we pursue this? This is outside of our lane, right? We're heavy welding, heavy fabricator, and we're stepping into the lighting industry. This is stuff for the Europeans, right? The Germans and stuff. And so while I was contemplating whether or not to pursue this business, I read Isaiah 58. Okay. During that time, I was doing a lot of contracts. Do y'all know that contracts are important? I got some friends here, y'all from the construction industry. You know? Is it worthwhile to read a contract, or do they just present it to you and you sign it? Is that good advice for a business person? Words have meaning, right? Written words have a lot of meaning. And if you... Right? Words have meaning. So there's a difference between a covenant and a contract. Y'all understand that? We understand that, right? Marriage is a covenant, right? But a lot of our business is based on contracts. So when you're in a covenant and the other person's not performing, your wife's not performing, the food got burnt, can you terminate that agreement for non-performance of the other party? Which is really a blessing for us men too, right? Because if we don't perform, she has, you know, you're in it for life. You know, that's a covenant, okay? Contracts are not that way. Contracts are different. So what we're going to be talking about today are the if-then promises of God, right? A lot of times we want to go to the then, and we want to skip the if, you know. So these are contractual. So I'm reading Isaiah 58. I had been at the time reviewing like industrial gas supply agreements, real estate contracts and things. So I've just been reading a lot of contracts. And so once you get to reading something, you can kind of feel the flow of it. Actually, a lot of it's copy and paste, but you still got to read it because sometimes they will add a little something to that copy and paste, and that's the one that gets you, right? So I'm going through this, and I'm thinking, this thing's reading like a contract. This sounds like a contract. So I'm going through it, and we'll get to a particular point, and then I read a statement. So I said, if and then, right? There was a then it said, your light will break forth like the dawn. And I was thinking, wait a minute, this is talking about my invention, I wasn't the sole inventor. I had two other co-inventors with me, and in business, we have to surround ourselves with people. And I'm thinking, this is talking about, the Word of God is living, right? So it'll speak to our current circumstance. Do you think the prophet Isaiah was thinking about wireless control systems when he wrote Isaiah 58? Probably not, but still, I'm reading it and I'm saying, hey, this is talking about the decision that I have to make. So I finished reading it, called my corporate attorney, said, hey, I want you to review a document. I want you to tell me, is this legally enforceable in Harris County, Texas? That's where I was. He's like, sure, Mark, you're going to email it? And I said, no, you can look it up, Isaiah 58. So he's like, oh, yeah, that's interesting and stuff. I said, no, I'll pay you. You know how much you pay a lawyer to read a document? I'm sure Leo. And you don't skimp on this. You really don't. I can read, you can read, but it's different. When a lawyer reads something, right, it's different. So $350 an hour, that's pretty reasonable for someone to just read something, right? And it's money very well spent. Because when the chips are down, if he says, you're in good standing, you're in good standing, right? And so even though we read well, I understand contracts, if it's very important, you bring somebody else in and they read it, right, Leo? So you do that. So I said, I'll pay you. So he's like, whatever, Mark, So he billed me. A couple of days later, he called me and he said, hey, this is kind of interesting. I have read it, and yeah, Mark, it has all the characteristics of a legally binding document. It states the breach of contract. It states the terms of the new agreement. It restates them for clarity, and it's signed. I said, okay. And then based on that, I rented a 10-by-10 booth at the Light Fair, International Light Fair in Las Vegas, the smallest booth you could get. Huh? It is faith, but to tell you what, when you've got a legally binding document that's enforceable in Harris County, it kind of helps your faith along, doesn't it? A little bit. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So I want to walk with you today. At the end of this, I'm going to ask you 2 questions, maybe 3. Number 1, do you feel that this is a valid, legally binding contract? Do you agree with the lawyer's opinion? Number 1, right? Number 2, would you want to be a party to this contract? Okay. Just because someone makes a contract or puts it out there, they can invite you to be a party to the contract, right? That's always a step in the process. So do you want to be a party of this contract? Is it a contract? Okay, and then, so we'll walk through Isaiah 58. So in your folder, I'm a businessman, so on the left-hand side, when you open the cover, that's if you want to go ahead and close the deal and sign it. I'm not going to wait till tomorrow. If you're ready, I have a pen. You probably have a pen. If you want to close the deal, we'll close the deal. I don't believe in waiting. If you're ready to close it, we'll close it, right? If you're not ready to close it and you want to study this more in depth, there's a QR code there. And then I've gone more in depth in some of the points that you can look at to get a better understanding or a deeper understanding before you decide to enter into this contract, okay? Okay, so let's just go straight to Isaiah 58. So you should have the contract right there. So I'll just kind of read it, and we'll go through it kind of quickly. And then knowing that, and tomorrow or whenever, if you want to look at any of these topics, for a deeper discussion, you can just scan that QR code and it'll lead you to a video that kind of deals with it deeper, right? So, shout it out loud, do not hold back, raise your voice like a trumpet, declare to my people their rebellion and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out, they seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that did what is right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions. They seem eager for God to come near to them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed? Yet, on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. What's the breach of contract? Exploiting your workers. Other versions say extracting your labors, extractive industry, right? You do as you please, exploiting your workers. So it's not just doing as you please. This has to do about workers. If it has to do about workers, it has to do about people in a position of leadership. How many people here have at least one person who you are responsible for? You're in a leadership role over them. Okay. So it's like, you're thinking, wait a minute, this is talking to the business person. I got a lot of pushback on this because many people said, Isaiah 58 is about spiritual things, Mark. It's not about money. Right? And I'm like, well, exploiting your workers very often has to do with money, And so we feel that this is the breach of contract. Do as you please and exploit your workers. Anybody tracking me on that? Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the fast that I have chosen, only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed, for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is this what you call fasting, a day acceptable to the Lord? Okay, that's a rhetorical question. The answer is no to all of it, right? These are people that are fasting, man. They're laying on the ground. They're wailing. They're crying out to God. They say, speak to us. Draw near to us. They're doing, and God said, no. You're exploiting your workers. I don't want to hear it. So what if our worker is a Christian brother and he doesn't, money is not that important for him, he's more on spiritual things, so I can pay him less. Is that okay? What if somebody works for you and you know that if you pay them more, that they're going to start their own business and they're going to be a formidable competitor because they're tougher than you are? So you keep your salary down a little bit, keep them. Is that okay? A little quiet. Okay, so now we go into the new contract. Is this not the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, untie the cords of the yoke, and set the oppressed free, and break every yoke. I personally believe this has to do with our employees, people who are under our influence and control. So what's a chain of oppression? Like you had company towns in this country. You know how they worked? You get a job there, they pay you a good salary. The only problem is it's too far to the Walmart, so you buy from the store, and they keep you there your whole life. You're always in debt. That's a chain of injustice. Social economic structures that keep you bound and keep you from pursuing the plan and purpose of God in your life, that's a chain, right? So those are iron chains. But we have another device. I was bound by this chain. I worked for a company. They started giving me raises. They could feel it coming, So they're like, my boss would call me in, hey, you got a raise, Mark. A month later, hey, Mark, you got a raise. And then he was already getting mad, It's like, hey, we're giving you a raise, So you can keep somebody bound with a golden chain. Works just like an iron chain. All you got to do is pay them so much that they won't. It's going to be really, really hard for them to walk away from that chain, right? You can give them a bonus at the end of the year. Say, if you're with me on December 31st, you get $10,000, And then you think, I know they're not going to leave me during the winter months, By the springtime, they're going to think, oh, man, we're too close to Christmas for me, and I'll keep them one more year, right? It's a golden chain. Works the same way, keeps you bound, right? So this doesn't mean that when you bless your employees that everybody's going to leave you. That's not what it means. It means that you're looking at them and you're not trying to hold them down or hold them back. You're actually going to empower them. Does that make sense? Has anybody ever had a job where the pay was just enough to where you could live, but you couldn't move away, or you couldn't do what God was showing you what to do? Anybody ever been in that position? Yeah, I worked at Taco Tico. I worked changing tires at a truck stop. It's hard, a lot of those situations. So those are chains of injustice. You know what a yoke is? Now we're talking about spiritual things, right? Spiritual bondage. Fatherlessness, that's a yoke. Comes down through generations, right? We have other things that come down through generations. And it's interesting that it says, untie the cords of the yoke. It doesn't mean like, get your axe and chop it off. This is a process. So if your background came where you had a lot of lack of provision, you may have a belief that there's not enough for everyone. That is a yoke. There's many things like that can be. And then we're talking about our employees, so we're helping to untie the yoke, ministering to the soul, right? Does that make sense? The first chapter of Isaiah says our people, they're covered with sores from the top of their head to the bottom of their feet. There's no soundness in them. They're just totally wounded. Isn't that our society right now? Depression, anxiety, suicide, all the different forms of methods to control pain, because that's all drug use is. It's just a way to control pain, right? And that is our society. So with our employees, when they come to us, they're covered with sores, right? And then this is a process of untying the cords of the yoke and ministering to the soul. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, clothe them, and not turn away from your own flesh and blood. What does feed the hungry mean? Let me ask a question. Let's say that Leo donates 300 chickens to a food drive or something like that. Is he feeding the hungry? He donates the money. Let's say he donates the money for Pastor Jose to buy the 300 chickens, for Pastor Jose to cook them and serve the people. Did he feed the hungry? He did. He did. He partnered. If he said, what are you going to do, 300 chickens? Yeah. You're going to cook them? Yes. Yeah, I'll do it. Right? So he's feeding the hungry, right? Partnering. So if he identifies a ministry that's particularly good at food bank, distribution of food, and so forth, and he invests in that, I think he's feeding the hungry, right? Providing the resources for it to be done. Now, he can do it personally. That's perfectly fine. But if his resources are going to fulfill the terms of this contract, then he's feeding the hungry. And I will challenge you that it's not disrespectful to God for you to put a check in that box. To say, yeah, I'm feeding the hungry. What about clothing the naked? What does that mean? So let's say you have, I don't know, maybe the Wings of Life, they're bringing people off the street. They usually don't have a whole lot of clothes. And You're providing clothing, you're providing shelter. Well, what about Powerhouse? They give backpacks, tons of backpacks to people. Is that considered clothing? Is that, when you go through that, are my resources, my effort, my talents, my time, are they going towards clothing the naked? And then if they're not, try to find a ministry that's doing it well. And come alongside, or do it yourself, go through your closet, what, you understand? Then you can put a check on that one. That's the way we do contracts, isn't it? Hey, I'm meeting my terms. I made the payment on time. I kept my car insured, I've kept it maintained. You can't come and tow it away. We'll have war, But if you don't make that payment on time, you don't have any legal standing. They'll just come and hook to it and take it away. Anybody ever had a car repossessed here? Yeah. You have? It's because of that contract, man, that writing. And she just can't go to the judge. The judge's going to say, hey, look, man, I don't care what the guy said. This is what you signed, And, but that's not designed to hurt you. It's actually designed to bless you, right? This is a part of a structured society. Do not turn away from your own flesh and blood. What does that mean?
I would say probably something like make sure you're honoring your mother and your father.
Absolutely. Are your mother and your father your own flesh and blood?
Yes.
What else? There's a commandment with the promise, right? Honor your mother and your father, that long may be your days and that you may prosper in the land that the Lord your God has given you as an inheritance. Give you a tip. You want to get in the real estate business? Honor your mother and your father so that you may prosper in the land that the Lord your God's giving you as an inheritance. So, as you can see today, I'm going to ask you, we have several pastors here, men of God. Could you not read this like a pastor this morning? Can I challenge you to read this like a lawyer? Is that okay? Because for this exercise, we want to know, what is my position in regards to this contract? Okay, with family, it's harder. It's a lot harder. A lot of times there's some wounding, man. People have done you wrong, You're totally justified. They live a bad lifestyle. These are not Christian people. These are really bad people, I don't want to associate with them. Is that okay? Well, you don't want to be influenced, of course, but can you turn away from your own flesh and blood and give them the cold shoulder? Can we do that and still be complying to this agreement? Man, if you have lobster in your refrigerator and your mama has no food in her refrigerator, is that okay? I've told my mom that. I said, Mom, I can't promise you'll always have a full refrigerator, but I can promise you one thing. If your refrigerator's empty, you can come to my house and there won't be anything in mine either. We can't control circumstance, but whatever I have, I will always try to bless you and to take care of you, right? So do not turn away from your own flesh and blood. What about, we live in blended families. I would venture to say that the Lord would probably say, if you're in a blended family, that is your family. Do not turn away from them. Is this hard?
No, it's good.
Why did the Lord do that? Surely a purpose. We're doing this not for our family. We're doing this to meet our side of a contract with God. So always think of that. If you've got hurt, you've been wounded, it doesn't mean reconciliation. There's a lot more to reconciliation, It just means you're not going to turn away from them and you're going to help them with how you can, Okay. So on chapter 8, you have the word then. So we said the if, then promises of God. So if you think about this thing, like right now we're talking about everything that you're doing, right? That we're doing. So we're going to unloose the chains of oppression, untie the cords of the yoke. We're going to feed the hungry, clothe the naked. We're not going to, give shelter to the traveler. We're not going to turn away from our own flesh and blood. Then, so now we're on Jehovah's side, right? The Lord God Almighty. It says, your light will break forth like the dawn. So I thought, man, this is talking about laser light. So I went to Santa Fe. I went to Las Vegas, got in the little booth. Man, I ordered some bright yellow shirts. I thought I was doing good. I don't know anything about sales. And the other people, they would look at me and they would go, oh, man, I wanted the Brazilian gold shirt, get a lot of attention. They called me Cheetos, man. They say, oh, man, Cheetos, So we didn't know what we were doing. So we go to this booth. We opened at 9 o'clock. And it's the people from Europe that come over and they looked at that fixture and they say, why is that little light flashing? I said, oh, it's running a program. Every 50th time it goes through a logic sequence, it blinks just to show us it's working. So how many of those can you switch? 45? I said, no. 1,000, 2,000. They're like, because that was the maximum then for a wireless network, 45 nodes, and then it starts falling apart, right? And they're like, you can switch 1,000 fixtures? How long? I said, 1 second. How do you do that? I'm like, Then I knew we were in over our heads, right? We were over our skis. So I'm like, oh, let me tell you what we do, So I wouldn't tell them how we did it. I just told them what we did, right? And, get me a patent attorney on the line, real quick. Because so that day, it was one after the other, and they'd come in, they'd flip their name tag around, So, hey, Mark, so how do you do that, man? I'd say, hey, how you doing? Oh, product development manager, General Electric, I'm like, how you doing, And we were slammed. So I looked at my partner, co-inventor. I said, hey, man, you haven't had a glass of water. You haven't gone to the bathroom. You haven't had lunch. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We were like slammed. So long story short, we got the Illuminating Engineers Society of America Award for the contribution to the art and science of lighting for that year. Had to fly to Philadelphia to pick up the honor. And we got the contract to do the Mandalay Bay Convention Center, 2 million square feet. So actually, we have a little video of it. I just went on YouTube, and I found the antique car auction at Starrett-Jackson the year before our lighting, and then the year after our lighting. Okay, so keep in mind, they saved over 60% in their electricity consumption, and then you'll see the difference in the lighting. So I think we have that video. Can y'all run it? You see the metal halide fixtures? Wow. 60% less electricity. Let me ask you a question. Did our light break forth like the dawn? Isaiah knew about wireless lighting control systems, right? He did. Huh? And we're a welding company. We have no idea what we're doing, right? We had no idea what we're doing. So I want you to think about that. Just think about that. This is our testimony. It's not anything about us. And it was way outside of our well house. We're not that smart. But it's the God, creator of heaven and earth, has written an agreement, and he has invited us to consider it and see whether or not we want to be a part to this contract. And he will perform this side of the agreement. So I want to go over a few of these things, and then we'll just move quickly here. If you spend yourself on behalf of the hungry, satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like noonday. The Lord will guide you always. Is that a good thing? He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land. Recession. He will strengthen your frame, physical health. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people, do you know who your people are? It's your kids. Or, in this context, your spiritual sons. They will rebuild the ancient ruins, will raise age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets for dwellings. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight, the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord. And I will cause you to ride in triumph on the heights of the land, and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob. And this is a very important and heavy part. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. Verbal contracts are legally binding in Harris County, Texas, as they probably are where you're from. And this one is a verbal contract that's written. It's a written verbal contract. It's signed. And because of that, my kids took the liberty to write Jehovah on the signature side of that page. So that's my question to you. It's like, is this a contract? Who thinks this is a contract? Do you want to be a party to the contract? If you do, just sign it and date it. And then you can keep it. And then be mindful to say, am I clothing the naked? Am I feeding the hungry? Is my heart turned towards my flesh and blood, towards my family? Am I doing my part? And you don't have to worry about the Lord. He will do his part always. And that has been my experience, in business, is that, when we do our part, the Lord more than graces us, and nothing's too hard. So thank you.